It's boring. It's woke. It's cringe. It's simplistic. It's woke, 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 woke.
Hey there folks, today I'd like to talk to you about the 1966 Czechoslovakian classic, Daisies. Now, on the surface it might look like a mere avant-garde exercise in the surreal and the farcical, but it is one of the most biting films of the Czech New Wave. The film targets so much in the odd adventures of Marie and Marie.
And I won't pretend to be a critic. I have never studied film or cinema. I am just a bloke with a mic and an internet connection and an opinion that occasionally connects with an audience. That's it. I know what I like and I know what I don't like. And I know most people, most of the general audience who has seen The Joker likes it. Now, I can again understand why some critics genuinely wouldn't like the film, but I would question their taste at this point. My guess is The Joker didn't turn out to be the woker like I thought it was going to be, and that really stung the access media. They thought they were being good little soldiers doing the bidding of these major corporations to maintain their access, and maybe they feel a little betrayed. Plus, it's a movie with a white male lead. We can't have that.
In effect, would be more beneficial to society. Wait, what was I talking about? I tuned out for a minute. Something about society? All right, we were talking about Joker. Okay, so Todd Phillips' 2019 film, The Joker. I don't like this movie. I'm well aware that many people love this film, though, and I kind of see why to a degree. Joker may appear like the most artful picture amid the tsunami of samey superhero films. I mean, it is by far the most divergent. I mean, no hero comes to save the day. The central villain is not portrayed as an anti-hero. The tone is relentlessly bleak, dark, and cruel. No fantastical elements, no villain scheme to take over a city or blow up a planet. It is the tale of one man losing his mind in a grimy city and never recovering from the darkness. From a surface level, the Joker has a lot of style. The setting is dirty and dreary within every scene. Joaquin Phoenix delivers an amazingly nuanced performance, as he usually does, for this very demanding role, considering that this is a villain that usually brings out a lot of the strangeness in actors. Robert De Niro is also great, considering his limited screen time, and the two actors have a handful of scenes that are a strong showcase of their talents. Now, when I say I dislike Joker, some may jump to the wild conclusions that my negativity towards such a film was spun by the incel championing rumors, the director's woke culture ramblings, the excessive violence being too gritty, or the good old conspiracy theory of me being a Marvel shill, giving all DC movies a bad rap. And no, my dislike of Joker stems from something far more troubling within the film's greater context of how it addresses weighty subjects. Beyond this surface level appeal, when delving into the very core of the picture, there is an emptiness and hideous contortion of philosophical and societal issues, all housed within a very thin script. And it's just not pretty, even from the perspective of a movie all about a downfall. The idea for a Joker film was born mostly from a desire to subvert the successful format of the more profitable comic book movies. Speaking of comics, did you know that Nerdrotic used to own a comic book shop? I don't know why I said that. Phoenix expressed interest in early 2014 for taking on a character study project with a DC Comics character akin to the Joker. He did not, however, want to play the Joker, as he felt that the character had been exhausted and had nothing new or interesting to offer, probably because of all the Jokers we've had in movies. Director Todd Phillips, however, did not want to make a comic book movie. But after finishing his 2016 film War Dogs, a forgettable dose of weapon-dealing drama gone awry a la Lord of War, he said this, quote, "War Dogs wasn't going to set the world on fire, and I was thinking, what do people really want to see?" So Phillips essentially said, fine, I'll do a comic book movie. After Wonder Woman proved to be a success and the distancing from a shared universe seemed to be the right call for DC Comics movies, it was the perfect time for Phillips to pitch a more grounded and different type of comic book movie about the Joker. With Phillips in control, the only man he wanted for the starring role was Phoenix. Considering the new route that was being taken here, Phillips was granted permission to take on the Joker, and Phoenix finally became interested in playing such a role, though he was still a bit hesitant and still voiced his concerns. Quote, "Oftentimes in these movies we have these simplified, reductive archetypes, and that allows for the audience to be distant from the character, just like we would do in real life, where it's easy to label somebody as evil and therefore say, well, I'm not that. Writing the script was not easy, as it took about a year to finish. Co-writing the script with Scott Silver was Phillips himself, and he faced numerous problems with Warner Brothers while trying to develop the story. Quote, "It was a year-long process when we finished the script just to get the new people on board with this vision because I pitched it to an entirely different team. There were emails about, you realize we sell Joker pajamas at Target. There were a zillion hurdles, and you just sort of had to navigate those one at a time. At the time, I would curse them in my head every day, but then I have to put it in perspective and go, they're pretty bold that they did this." Now, Phillips's depiction of the Joker would not be the traditional origin, but rather an amalgam of various versions. A big inspiration for the premise likely came from Alan Moore and Brian Boland's graphic novel, The Killing Joke. There were also no plans for a sequel or a shared universe, another caveat that further attracted Phoenix to the role. Once production started, Phoenix threw himself into this role, becoming so immersed in the character that he would lose his composure and storm off the set. He lost so much weight for the role that reshoots would be nearly impossible, and this problem caused Phillips to rewrite nearly the entire script while in production, and as a result, much of that year-long work would ultimately have to be rewritten even further. It's not hard to see the rewriting in this film either, considering how this film seems to focus more on specific scenes of great acting than a grander sense of saying anything new or interesting about the Joker. And look, I'm all for diverging from source material to weave something new, and Joker at least tries to be more of its own thing. Rather than following the criminal of Jack Napier, who ends up as the Joker, we instead follow Arthur, a mentally disturbed man who ends up as the villain. Arthur is a hired clown performer in 1980s Gotham. He is despised by hooligans who beat him up in the street for no reason. His boss hates him for losing a store's sign during the scuffle. He has a mental condition that causes him to laugh uncontrollably. His medication isn't helping him, nor is his mental health worker. His only comfort is his aged mother living in his apartment, and his fantasies of someday making it as a stand-up comedian, perhaps performing on the Murray Franklin show. Life sucks for Arthur, until he murders 3 rich jerks on the subway who are harassing him, throws on the Joker attire, and assumes the role that everyone more or less knows, of a man bittered by Gotham that he laughs at its futility with senseless carnage. He kills Murray Franklin live on television, he causes chaos in the streets, and he ends up in prison. The film darts between several aspects of Arthur's psyche, but never really explores the implications as it just stumbles around in the dark trying to find a point. In the film, Zazie Beetz plays a single mom in Arthur's apartment complex. She smiles one day in the elevator at him, and this makes Arthur a little happy. Later, she knocks on his door and engages in a simple conversation with him. After killing the 3 jerks, Arthur comes over to her place, and they just quickly make out. Later, come to his comedy show, where he seems to do well with her presence there. She will also be present for Arthur when his mother is in the hospital. He is the beacon of hope in his life, except she's not. Revealed in their last scene together, their relationship was all in the head of Arthur. A cunning twist for sure, but what does that say about Arthur? Throughout the picture, Arthur seems to only have interactions with 3 different women: his neighbor, his mother, and his mental health worker. The mental health worker tries to help Arthur, but he is beyond her level of care. His mother offers mild comfort, but is also a liar, as it's later revealed that she's just a terrible mother. After all of this, Arthur's neighbor is portrayed as the last pillar of his outlet for love from the opposite gender in this world. And it's fake. But this fantasy didn't just come from nowhere. We can see his limited view of women in brief scraps of cutout porno in his joke book. His ideal is nearly forced on a woman that he barely knows after he breaks into her apartment. This is his level of egotism for how he believes the world should be. Thus, what seems like it's the last branch of hope snapping for Arthur to transform him into the Joker comes off more like a brooding sense of entitlement, feeling that the world should owe him happiness, with or without its consent. Another problem is that so much of what drives Arthur to madness is from forces beyond his control. This is where the film diverges heavily from the big comparison to Taxi Driver, where Travis Bickle falls off the deep end into a grim ending. Bickle's tale is a cautionary one because the many actions that lead to his descent are of his own choosing. He chooses to take a date to a porno theater and chooses to gun down a pimp. Arthur has little control by comparison. He didn't go looking for the yuppies on the subway to attack, they came to him. He didn't just go out and buy a gun to murder them either, he was gifted a gun. He didn't run out of meds because he forgot to fill his prescription, he was cut off. And he certainly couldn't do anything about the twisted mother who lied to him. And sure, Arthur kills people. And that's wrong, but if he didn't, in his rapidly decaying state, he'd probably just go homeless and kill himself, as suicide is alluded to several times and is a more accurate reflection of when mental illness is untreated. Arthur, he believes he has lit a spark where his talents are revered rather than mocked, as narcissistically violent as those talents may be. This road leads to the very familiar bad take about the villain being right. People who don't look very deep into superhero films usually come away with this sort of impression. People like no, what's his name? Well, you know the type I'm talking about. To better stress this point about misreading villains, let's use Avengers Infinity War as an example. A meme I've seen circulated essentially says that childhood is idolizing the Avengers, while adulthood is realizing that Thanos was right. Well, that's deeply cynical, but also wrong. This is an oversight. Like, one major nitpick that people have with Avengers Infinity War is that if Thanos has the power of the universe at his disposal, why does he choose to wipe out half the universe instead of creating infinite resources? Some will mark this down as lazy screenwriting, but it's actually rather strong screenwriting if you think about it, because Thanos doesn't wipe out half the universe because it's the most logical thing to do with such a power. He does so because he has grown bitter and distasteful with the universe that he'd rather burn it all down than rebuild it. This is why he's the villain. His solution is cruel, and not just for the heroes, but for himself as well. Childhood is idolizing the Avengers, adulthood is idolizing Thanos, and real adulthood is realizing that Thanos was fucking wrong and that calling an infinitely expansive universe is really dumb. Joker's contentment with evil by the end of the movie, with nothing to counter it, ultimately conveys that Gotham's corruption is egregious enough to warrant nihilistically fueled violence instead of political violence. Why not just burn it all down and kill those that you deem as a symptom of society's woes, however small or manufactured that may be? Why not just become an obnoxious doomer? If this isn't really a cautionary tale for the Joker, then who should be cautious? Well, the most likely candidate would be Thomas Wayne. He had a chance to address Arthur and help him out, but refused and kicked a mentally disturbed man to the curb. The lack of empathy led to Arthur's lack of empathy and thus brought out the violent protests. All of this could have been avoided had Thomas Wayne just listened and took care of the poverty problems within his city. I really hate the implication of this. The implication being that you better be nice to the mentally ill, because if you're not, they might come to kill you. So maybe the rich should chip in more to offer more mental health support to ensure that there isn't that much despair. Alternatively, they could just increase police funding and gun down the mentally ill before they can fire the first shot. You can probably guess which one they'd favor more. But then there's the more loose theory of Arthur's distorted perception. Maybe Thomas Wayne wasn't really murdered. Maybe Arthur didn't go on the talk show and commit an act of murder. Maybe the riots never happened. Maybe all of it was just in Arthur's head. Okay, there are some major problems with this theory beyond the fact that there was a Joker sequel. It's already established from the 2 confirmed fantasies of Arthur that his escapist visions are those of joy and empathy and not murder and violence. Sure, one could argue based on Arthur's chaotic notebook of dark jokes and porno that his fantasies could shift in this direction, but there's not much grounding for this argument by the end of the film. There's not a whole lot of clues, and the most lucid scene to suggest this all in his head staging is a brief shot of Arthur banging his head against a door. But let's entertain this notion and suppose that perhaps the entire third act of Arthur transforming into the Joker and bringing rebellion to the streets of Gotham is all in his head. How does this enhance the film? Someone suggests that this unreliable format offers up a clever questioning of what we're watching, but considering how none of it is grounded with a firm reality, what stakes are there? Like, why should we care about whether or not Arthur shoots Franklin, or even himself, if this is all in his head? Why should we be intrigued by the protests in the streets with clown masks if it's not real? why should we care how much darker Arthur's world can get if this is all imaginary? Look, there's nothing inherently wrong with a film where there's a twist to the perceptions of the central plot being imaginary, from The Wizard of Oz to Fight Club. But those films are not merely revered because the central character was delusional. The twist in Fight Club of finding out that the narrator does not have an identity or a friend may be surprising, but it doesn't come out of left field. There are numerous clues throughout, and more importantly, a grounding to see where imagination ends and reality begins. The Wizard of Oz is almost entirely within fantasy, but it still brings everything together, with reality returning and familiar figures filling in the gaps of why Dorothy met the people that she did in Oz. Joker's ending fills us in on little to suggest a more frequent fantasy. Maybe some of it was a dream. We don't know for sure, right? We see the entire film through Joker's eyes, and his mind is an erratic mess of lies and fantasies. We're given no firm answers about what may or may not be real in Arthur's darker moments, just merely a cobbling of loose theories built on suggestive editing and a thin script. Another argument I've heard about the Joker movie is that it better explains Joker's philosophy as to why he became the madman that he is, but Joker's philosophy has already been known and made crystal clear, especially in 2008's The Dark Knight. In that film, the Joker's line of, "I believe whatever doesn't kill you makes you stranger," says it all. He's a nihilist in that he doesn't believe in anything, and rather than try to find some solution to the problems of justice in Gotham, he merely laughs at the notion that justice should exist at all. Going even further, he also believes that nothing has value, including human life. Of course, this then raises a contradictory worldview of personal value, because if Joker believes that people's lives are worthless, why should he exist? In the Joker movie, Arthur's contemplation of his own death suggests that there should be some value in his demise, a shocker for the world. If he really believed the world was a hopeless and dark place within the mindset of nihilism, he would not hope his death meant something, or plan it out for his talk show appearance. He would just kill himself in any way without thinking about it, because what's the point of assigning any value to anything? Of course, if he kills himself, then he wouldn't get to be the Joker, now would he? The inclination towards a nihilistic mindset is why the Joker is portrayed as a villain in Todd Phillips' movie. When Joker is asked whether or not he's making a political statement with his attire, he responds that he's not political and doesn't believe in anything. He's wrong, both in how denying politics is not a political statement and that his nihilistic views are his core beliefs. This is probably Joker's greatest delusion, in believing that he has found his calling in believing in nothing, when it is a broken philosophy that is regressive and hypocritical. But again, this is all stuff we already know about Joker before the Todd Phillips film, and merely showcasing it through an unreliable narrator lens doesn't exactly make him any more sympathetic or complex than he was before. If all that seems like too much to counter the Joker's dark worldview, fine, let's simplify it. The Joker kills people, and that is morally wrong. And yes, I know that statement leaves a lot dangling if you want to toss that notion into the philosophical areas of Kant and Locke for debating the merits of morality, but there's a lot less to unpack from that than the idiotic meme of the Joker being right. I couldn't have been the only person who went to the theater where at least one audience member cheered for the Joker murdering a man in his apartment. The excited audience member I saw had a garish Joker shirt on and just threw up his hands and cheered for Arthur to plunge the scissors into his mean coworker's neck. Does that fan know that the Joker's the villain? Does he know we're not rooting for him to bring more violence to Gotham? Well, I mean, there's no hero in this picture, so I guess he has to root for someone. Somehow I doubt he was cheering Joker on for challenging how class warfare and lack of mental health care reap value from the individual and lead to a primal sense of survival. I think he just liked Joker killing people. That's messed up, though not as messed up as Nerdrotic making and selling meth, which... Why did I say that? What the hell is wrong with me? Aside from the Joker being the most popular Batman villain, I found the very choice of the Joker's origins to be confounding for this type of story. Joker is perhaps the least sympathetic of all the villains that Batman has to offer. It's easier to feel for a villain like Two-Face or Mr. Freeze, considering the pathos that they have to offer. Compared to those other villains, Joker is more of an abstraction of nihilism that remains little more than that, even in a film where he has pathos. When I say I didn't like the Joker movie, and for that matter any time someone witnesses a divergence from the audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes.
And I know, hashtag not all, we are talking about the members of the Access Media who were hoping for incel violence, whatever that is.
Many assumptions are jumped to, and usually without reading anything. That I must be a Marvel fan who hates on DC Comics. Like, I'm a big Superman fan, but not the point here. That I must be a sensitive critic who can't handle a dark superhero film with lots of violence. That I must be detached from the appeal of general audiences. That I was looking too hard for politics in this movie. Or that old chestnut of just being paid off by Disney. Or that I went to prison for taking and dealing drugs, except I didn't do that. That was Nerdrotic. Why do I keep doing this? Of course, these are all short and ill-thought-out excuses for being defensive of a film and also being disinterested in discussing it beyond a love-it-or-hate-it consensus. My reasons for not liking the popular comic book movie where a clown murders people have been laid out in this video. I know this dissection doesn't make for the quickest response in conversation, and for this reason, I've chosen to identify the film in short conversations as sloppy, just a towering mess of mixed messages and lost potential. One could argue that I'm looking too deep into the film, and I could certainly argue the opposite, that one is not looking deep enough. And sorry, I just can't go into a film that brings up class struggle, mental health, the sins of the father, and nihilism, and not think about what this film is trying to say in its muddled method past just Joaquin Phoenix deserving an Oscar. If you like this film, relax, I get it. You know, Joaquin Phoenix gives a great performance, as does Robert De Niro. The tone is kept dark throughout, and the divergence from, you know, the lighter and fluffier comic book movies was probably very refreshing for a lot of people who go to these movies regularly. So if you enjoy the film on this level, it's understandable. Just understand that the film's frustrating juggling act of philosophy and societal issues is more thematically messy than thought-provoking for some, like myself. And when a film treats nihilism and the ills of capitalism like Christmas tree decorations to the point where the term fuck the rich becomes set dressing, it's hard for me to enjoy the picture on that level. The film is very flawed with its messaging, despite people like Nerdrotic saying it's a non-message movie.
It's not a message movie. Again, it is a super villain origin story.
There is a message, you fucking idiot. You're just too dumb to understand. I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked again. I'll say this, though. I do appreciate Todd Phillips wanting to retool the Joker into something different and diverge hard from the usual villain origins. It didn't work for me, but I still think it's worth trying. Because if you want to see a great retooling of the Joker, a perfect example of this was with the indie film The People's Joker. Now, this was a far more inventive and thematically grounded usage of the Joker and the DC Comics characters in general to tell a story of the transgender experience. Director Vera Drew started the film
a film carried completely on the backs of Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, who are both perfect for their roles and both have brilliant chemistry, which again makes you think, why in the hell haven't they done this sooner? As with all Deadpool movies, it's self-aware and a first for the MCU. It's self-deprecating, which is refreshing.
Thus providing a more valuable deconstruction of comic book superheroes and villains. Wait, what happened? What was I talking about? Deconstruction? Oh, right. I was talking about Deadpool and Wolverine and Deconstruction. Okay, so superhero cinema hasn't been very good at deconstruction. Deconstruction cinema is built on stripping and exposing the cinematic apparatus and its ideology in an attempt to find something new within the breaking down of film elements. It's more or less counter cinema. Now, despite what some YouTubers might have told you, deconstruction is not when your favorite superhero gets humiliated. A better example of deconstruction in the comics can be found in stuff like Watchmen. The movie Deadpool and Wolverine does not exist as a deconstruction of superhero films because it is trapped in convention. Wade Wilson might break the fourth wall and comment on the nature of Marvel movies, but the format still binds him. He still has a tragic origin story, a villain to defeat, a woman to save, and cameos from other Marvel films. Deadpool still goes through the motions of a Marvel movie, even if he's aware of them, making his antics more of a playful roast than biting satire on the genre. Some folks online have misinterpreted mildly shifting character arcs as a form of deconstruction. The fourth Thor movie, Love and Thunder, does not deconstruct Thor, just because it more prominently features Jane Foster temporarily taking on the mantle. It is also not a deconstruction for Thor to lose power over his hammer and be stripped of his dignity by a powerful god. All of that literally happened in the first Thor movie. The film doesn't suck because Jane Foster gets to wield the hammer for a few days. It sucks because it's the same story being told again. Thor is not being deconstructed because Thor still ends up as Thor by the end of the film and ready for the next Avengers movie. Nothing is getting deconstructed in that film. In fact, most modern superhero films are incapable of deconstruction on a genre level. Deadpool can't function on a level of deconstruction because it still adheres to the superhero formula, even while mocking its conventions. This aspect was present in the first two Deadpool movies, but it's at its loudest in Deadpool and Wolverine. Some might think that the third Deadpool film satirizes the Marvel Cinematic Universe as he calls out the current MCU as a low point and refers to the tired nature of the multiverse, but if Deadpool were really going against the MCU, he wouldn't be giddy about having a moment with Thor or gleefully citing references to the Loki TV series or, speaking directly to the camera about how much he loves Disney more than Fox. Having stunt casting of fan-desired Channing Tatum as Gambit and the reprisal of Wesley Snipes as Fox-era Blade is not going against the grain of the MCU. Because Marvel Studios already did that type of casting with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Deadpool is not performing a satire on the MCU. He's doing a roast in which he pokes fun at Disney's efforts but makes no greater attempt to condemn Disney beyond mere mild mockery. It only seems like satire for the anti-woke crowd who really want that harsh criticism of Disney so badly that they're willing to overlook the butt-kissing that Deadpool is doing for a studio. A better display of deconstruction can be found in the 1966 Czechoslovakian classic Daisies. Now, on the surface, it might look like a mere avant-garde exercise and a
This brings us to what I'm guessing will be the best comedy of the year. Am I racist? And no, it doesn't come from Hollywood. It comes from Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire that currently has a 99% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, and surprisingly enough, not a single major corporate critic has reviewed it. And one of the only precious few mainstream critics with any integrity and the balls to review it was Jeremy John. But I do find it interesting that they're not reviewing one of the top 5 films in the country at time of recording when they love to use phrases like, "This is an important film. This film will challenge your beliefs. This film puts a mirror to society." When that's exactly what Am I Racist does. DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, something I might have brought up once or twice on this channel. Matt Walsh is best known for What is a Woman and his commentary on the Daily Wire, YouTube, and Twitter, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. And I gotta give it up to Matt. His trolling and deadpan humor is spot on. And this, in a way, is an answer to Borat. This is certainly something Sacha Baron Cohen or somebody else should have done a long time ago. But they're too afraid to.
What is happening? See, what is going on? I've heard from some person that Matt Walsh's terrible comedy/documentary Am I Racist is akin to Borat, and to some extent the film shares some surface level similarities, but the bulk of the film is far divorced from Sacha Baron Cohen's character. Borat's appeal was playing up a satirical portrait of a misogynist, racist, anti-Semite immigrant testing the waters to see how willing people are to accept his worldview. People identify with him, then Borat's high fives and very nice punchlines gives these bigots enough rope to hang themselves on camera. Borat's 2006 film Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan primarily capitalizes on the fish out of water elements as Borat visits America. There's no single target in the movie, even though Borat's overall goal is to marry Pamela Anderson. It's a road trip movie that mocks everything from paranoia about 9/11 to nationalism present in patriotic expression to the flaws within religion and how easily those beliefs can be misread for the sake of bigotry. The film was definitely funny and provocative when it came out. I mean, I can still remember seeing it in the theater opening weekend with my friends and nearly falling out of my seat at the scene where a naked Borat runs after his also nude producer through the halls of a hotel while wielding a sex toy. And don't get me wrong, there are parts of this movie that have definitely aged poorly, ranging from the lawsuits that arose over the coercion of unsuspecting people, to the exaggerated depiction of Kazakhstan as a backwards culture, to the very repetition of Borat's catchphrases that has lessened the impact with about as much decay as Austin Powers.
It's good cake.
My wife made it.
My wife! Borat!
Matt Walsh's Am I Racist takes a much different route by having Matt play himself. Matt appears in the film with the explicit goal of trying to find out why America is so obsessed with race. He ponders this question when he finds himself uncertain about whether or not it's politically correct to ask a black woman for black coffee. I have never met anyone who has had this concern. That honestly sounds like more of a you problem, Matt, and not something within society that has decayed communication. Like, if you're really going to be that fucking weird about it, just say you don't want anything in your coffee. Just say you want it plain. This is not a problem unless being around black people in general just makes you feel uncomfortable because you're probably racist. Wait, I have done this video before. What is Within Am I Racist, Matt has to fabricate situations in his favor. For example, there's the scene that some people bring up about how Matt was able to get on TV and convince white people to express their guilt. But what some might not notice is that Matt didn't make it onto an actual TV news broadcast, but rather a sponsored segment from the Do the Work workshop. Basically, this is a segment that the Daily Wire paid for, and not a convincing infiltration by Matt Walsh. Now true, Borat also has staged segments in his own movie. I doubt anybody seriously believes that Pamela Anderson was unsuspectingly targeted by Borat for the climax of the film. The key difference, though, is that when the Borat movie stages scenes, they're meant more to advance the narrative rather than to prove a thematic point about our reality. It's a primary reason why the film was nominated for the Academy Award of Best Adapted Screenplay and not Best Documentary. Matt doesn't have much of a narrative beyond his general thesis to prove that DEI is a scam. This leads to many scenes that stumble, and not in a comedic slapstick sort of way. What most people do know about Matt Walsh is not good. His political rants laced with misinformation have led to real harm. It's no wonder that even the defenders of this film still try to distance themselves from Matt's controversial politics, despite his politics being in the foreground of this film. Among Matt Walsh's many shitty takes is his hateful propaganda book, Johnny the Walrus, a book intended for children that compares being transgender to being a walrus with disturbing implications. So if all that disgusts you, it's unlikely that you'd want to engage with Matt in discussions. It also means you're unlikely to watch his film or even review it. This might explain why there were very few critics who decided to review the movie despite review screeners being offered and declined. And it's challenging to capture the attention of critics for smaller films, and it was likely even more difficult for the Daily Wire, having a reputation for being a disgusting conservative news outlet. A similar lack of appeal happened with Matt's previous film, What is a Woman, which received very few reviews from critics. The narrative spun due to the lack of reviews on Am I Racist is weird. It's portrayed as though critics are too cowardly to review the film, but also that they should review the movie because it made a lot of money. Well, not like a ton of money, it only made about $12 million, but that's still pretty good for a film with a budget of $3 million. The Daily Wire and conservative critics touted this film as the top-performing documentary of 2024, which, sure, that's true, but also, how many documentaries can you recall at the theater in 2024? Also, critics not reviewing your film doesn't make it some incredible outlier that defied expectations with an audience score well over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a fifth God's Not Dead film that has no mainstream outlet reviews and a 98% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, but that doesn't mean that anybody is taking God's Not Dead more seriously. It's just too niche for mainstream audiences or critics to even care about. More critics eventually reviewed Am I Racist, and they were mostly negative. You can really tell which critics are more forgiving of the film based on how they talk about it in their pull quotes. Top critic Vincent Cunningham of The New Yorker wrote in his review about how Matt seems to struggle with citing this book by Randall Kennedy. Quote, "The joke is that it's hard for a person to buy the book because of how it's hard to say the title. If he were to give Kennedy's work a try, he might find a probing, refreshing antidote to the thinking set forward by simplistic and patronizing work. Sir Medina of Cinephilia wrote, quote, "The questions raised by Walsh do not seem to me to be adequately explored, and unfortunately it remains in a comfort zone that is simply boring." YouTube essayist Jesse Gender wrote, quote, "Despite a better target than the bigoted What is a Woman, an industry about profiting off white guilt, not fighting racism, it shares the same flaws. Manipulative editing, lazy jokes, and no curiosity, ending on a thoughtless finale with no call to action." Now compare those negative reviews to the positive ones. Alan Ing of Film Threat wrote, quote, "Half the audience will laugh and the other half will walk out." Okay, that doesn't say much about who will be walking out or why. Wade Major of Film Week wrote a more middling review with, quote, "You're not getting anywhere on the subject, but it's funny. But is he making his point? I think he's too divisive a figure to be persuasive." And since I mentioned Jesse Gender, let's also mention YouTube critic Jeremy Johns, who simply stated, quote, "It made me laugh." Yeah, I'll bet it did, Jeremy. Even outlets that seem to agree with Matt's ideas, like the Christian magazine World, still had issues with the film. Specifically, Denny Burke took issue with how Walsh lied to D'Angelo, and Matt's response that he was doing what it takes to win the culture war. In response to all that, Burke wrote, quote, "I'm not saying that Walsh lied in his interactions with D'Angelo. I wasn't there, and he has not responded to my request for comment. Perhaps he didn't lie. Still, doing what it takes to win the culture war suggests that the ends justify the means, no matter what they are. Surely that is not what Walsh believes." Also, I reject the claim made by someone that Am I Racist is the funniest film of 2024. The funniest film is clearly Hundreds of Beavers, a film that knows how to utilize slapstick comedy effectively. So no, I don't think Am I Racist is going to set Hollywood on fire with its $12 million box office, a handful of middling reviews, and a piss-poor attempt to do a Borat for conservatives. The biggest problem with this film is that Matt Walsh does not appear to be very intellectually curious about how DEI has become an industry. It's worth looking at how the history of racism has clashed with our capitalist structures, which made this industry possible. So, you know what? Let's actually dig into how DEI has become more of an industry worthy of scrutiny. So diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And after watching it, it turned out to be just another bad streaming film from Netflix. A boring, soulless, and contrived intersectional fever dream that's a cross between a bad attempt at a John Waters film, Mrs. Doubtfire, a theater kid's performative art adaptation of Sicario, and a corporate DEI seminar. From GLAAD, Amelia Perez is not good trans representation. And the uber progressive left, Amelia Perez is a regressive movie that thinks it's woke. Oh, it's woke. It's just shit like the rest of them. It's boring. It's woke. It's cringe. It's simplistic. But it's just pretentious enough to give an aura of sophistication to convince a bunch of dumb rich people to give it a award.
Was I just... What did... Something about DEI? Oh, wait, yeah, it was Amelia Perez. All right, so, Amelia Perez was undoubtedly one of the worst Oscar nominations for Best Picture at the last ceremony. The film tried to be a mashup of a musical drama and narco-crime thriller with clunky twists in plot and tone involving gangs and changing gender. How it garnered Oscar nominations, however, is not that much of a mystery. Understanding how the film got that far requires understanding how the For Your Consideration campaign works. At the end of the year, studios will often send out promotional screeners and products to garner favor with the movie voting blocks of the Academy and critics groups. Only so many films can be considered in that period, so most studios only back a handful of films that they think will have the best shot. Although Netflix does back more than one film for award season, it usually puts most of its eggs into one basket for one film that they think has the best shot at Best Picture. They did so the previous year with Maestro, and they doubled down with Amelia Perez. And I cannot begin to describe to you just how many promotional materials I was sent for this film. Netflix backed this film so strongly that I knew it would be nominated for Best Picture long before nominations were even being announced. And it made sense beyond the mere promotional campaign. You see, Emilia Perez isn't so much a representation of transgender women as it is the liberal level of observing them. Liberals tend to have a limited understanding of backing a particular minority. They can only show so much support that it doesn't conflict with their capitalist devotion or cost them votes or make them feel uncomfortable. Liberals might support transgender people and empathize with their plight for human rights, but only in the same way that liberals think supporting black communities is by wearing African garb. Their heart might be in the right place, but their brains are miles away. This is how a film like Green Book was able to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Green Book is more of a tone-deaf take on race relations that retools the story of Don Shirley into more of a white savior picture for his pal Tony Lip. The film featured many awkward scenes that were interpreted as comedy, like Tony teaching Don how to eat fried chicken. Like, we're seriously supposed to believe that Don Shirley, a man who grew up in the American South with Jamaican immigrant parents and marched in Selma during the Civil Rights Movement, that guy never learned how to eat fried chicken in that entire time? But don't think about any of the details, just enjoy this charming, funny scene where racism was solved through KFC's Extra Crispy Chicken. Was KFC Extra Crispy Chicken even around in the 60s? 1972? Fuck this movie! If you're a liberal seeking any movie to tackle racism in the most surface level way possible, and you're willing to ignore huge chunks of historical revisionism, Green Book seems like a winner. And it was, for the crowd of aging liberals who want a safe and saccharine way to approach racism, where cultural context can be ignored. That's why Green Book won the award for Best Picture, instead of a far more deserving film on the topic of historical racism with Spike Lee's Black Klansman. Black Klansman was too direct and vicious in how it skewered racism of the past and related it to the problems of today. But Green Book is a nice, safe film on the topic that you can take your grandparents to. Like, seriously, so many old people went to go see this film in the theater. It's ridiculous. Emilia Perez functioned in the same way. The film treats the transgender experience with a stumbling sympathy. If the process of switching gender seems too icky for the liberals, then, well, here's a flashy and amusing musical number to make that medicine go down. It's not a good musical number, but it's theatrical and will make you feel like you're watching an important film that still has showmanship, even when it's tripping all over itself into holes of racism and transphobia that it was initially trying to avoid. Thankfully, Emilia Perez didn't sweep the Oscars. People like Nerdrotic complained that the film received too many award nominations, yet it only ended up winning for Best Original Song and Best Supporting Actress. Oscar night's big winner was Sean Baker's Anora, and all was right with the world. Anora is such an amazing film worth talking about, and we won't have to hear any annoying think pieces from conservative dipshits about how the transgenders are taking over the Academy Awards or some other bullshit like that. You know, there are much better transgender films out there, especially during 2024. Now, if you want an actual good film with transgender representation, the more mainstream example would probably be I Saw the TV Glow, and I could probably just fall back on that, but I thought I'd use this opportunity to highlight a smaller voice with the indie horror film T-Blockers. Now, it's not exactly a prestige film like Emilia Perez, but it does wield the horror genre very well with a scrappy, low-budget filmmaking technique. Now, the plot of this film revolves around a transgender filmmaker who's trying to film a horror film, but there's this...
Did Joker need a sequel? No. Everything he did to build up Arthur Fleck into the Joker is completely undone. While the presence of the Joker is still there, we're right back to pathetic Arthur Fleck. No, the single most frustrating thing is the complete deconstruction of Arthur Fleck. Because essentially it's just Arthur facing the consequences of his actions playing the Joker. It's character assassination through character reversion. Arthur Fleck is right back where he was at the beginning of the first movie. Joker 2 comes off as if it's apologetic for its predecessor. It's almost a troll. And for all I know, it is.
Wasn't I just talking about the Joker? No, wait, the Joker sequel, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so Joker Folie A tries to continue the erratic mindset of Joker after his murder and arrest. The film darts between the elongated trial sessions that don't reveal much, the prison sequences that boast torture and violence, and the fantasy musical sequences relying on a hodgepodge of musical genres with no change in Arthur's singing voice. Now, the thesis of this film is much clearer than that of the first Joker film. By the climax, the movie makes it clear in no uncertain terms that the Joker's infamy makes him miserable and so empty that he denies the title that he's been given. It's more or less an argument against those who idolize the Joker. You know, like that guy who I mentioned in the Joker shirt who was really excited to see Joker kill people. Now, on paper, I like the idea, but the execution never builds up in a satisfying way. The prison scenes are fine, but the isolation and violence feels a little too standard. The courtroom scenes are just a bore, and normally I love courtroom dramas, but these courtroom scenes just keep banging their head against the wall with the same points, most of which were already expressed in the previous film. And then there's the fantasy musical sequences, which don't add much progression or rhythm in the song choices or the set styles. It's more or less Joker's variety show, and not at all that entertaining in its presentation or insightful about what it has to say about Joker's psyche. The film also has a lot of the same problems that plagued the previous Joker movie. Director Todd Phillips is so out of the loop on the repetition in comic book movies that he really thought adding Harley Quinn into the story would be a refreshing element because it would give Joker somebody to talk to. You know who else thought that was a good idea? Paul Dini, who first created Harley Quinn for Batman the Animated Series. And she never left. Harley Quinn had plenty of comic books and an animated series, and she's appeared in more DC Comics movies in the last decade than Joker. This is what especially frustrates me about Todd Phillips, because while he's divorced enough from comic book culture to better desire divergence and subversion, he's also too ignorant of comic books to know when he is or is not creating effective subversion. Because the inclusion of Harley is not that original or clever. The same goes for the inclusion of Harvey Dent, who shows up as the DA for the courtroom scenes, and eventually is scarred so that he'll fulfill the prophecy of becoming the villain Two-Face. The sensation of adhering to all the Batman origins ends up diluting whatever subversion Todd Phillips was going for. Batman fans who are pissy about this version of the Joker being too old to fight Bruce Wayne when he grows up to become Batman can rest easy, because it turns out that Arthur isn't the real Joker as he tires of the role and is brutally replaced by a younger psychopath, ensuring that Joker will be ready for Batman's inevitable arrival. Contrary to what others might say, this is not a deconstruction or a deconstruction of a deconstruction, because it's hard to see Phillips going against the grain when his film is clearly within the strict borders of DC Comics and Warner Brothers. I do, however, like the idea of demystifying the Joker by making his infamy hollow. I also like the desire to criticize those who mistakenly idolize the grimier version that Joaquin Phoenix had perfected. But that whole thesis just arrives so abruptly. The film just keeps spinning its wheels with the same three scenes that rarely connect well. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating. A film with a good message has to be a good movie first. And Joker Folie A is not a good movie. It's not well written, it doesn't find a good flow with its direction, and the Batman lore further gunks up a film that clearly wanted to be something different, but couldn't quite get there. And again, much like the first Joker film, my distaste is more nuanced than a talking point of the anti-woke. You might hate Joker Folie A because it didn't deliver the Joker that you wanted, but I hate the sequel because it never builds on its concepts or works hard for its thesis punchline. We are not the same. Fuck you.
Yes, it's part Die Hard, part Air Force One, part globalist propaganda, and all feminist power fantasy fanfic. Don't believe me? This comes from the paragon of objective journalism, The Daily Beast. G20 Viola Davis plays Kamala Harris, I disagree there, in a Die Hard movie. Simply put, it's Michelle Obama versus the anti-globalist crypto bro terrorists, set to the backdrop of a Wakanda-like South Africa. Anthony Starr is Homelander, a toxic white male, bitter veteran, crypto enthusiast, and live streamer. And a pretty good one at that. I mean, look at those views. I mean, no word if he's monetized or not, but he could always dual stream on Rumble. I'm kidding. Just a little bit.
Okay, so G20 is... Wait, why am I talking about G20? That's not a good film. There's not a lot to talk about with it. It's a lukewarm action thriller where Viola Davis plays a kick-butt president who has to stop some crypto bro terrorists. The plot isn't even that clever in how they try to use AI to manipulate markets into purchasing cryptocurrencies. It's such a ridiculous plot. And look, I know people who believe in crypto and AI are dumb as shit, but even this feels like a stretch. Well, I guess we can discuss the problems with how the film uses cryptocurrencies and AI perceptions. Because in one sense, you know, there is a level of deregulation that I think could be used in a terrorist plot, considering how the blockchain...
Aside from the honorable mention of Furiosa becoming victim of something Fury Road helped create, it wasn't patient zero, but it certainly helped usher in the bait and switch the male protagonist for a female protagonist girl boss era of Hollywood. An era that has destroyed the female protagonist more than any real misogynist could dream of. Well, it turns out Mad Max does need to be in a Mad Max film, and he needs to be played by Mel Gibson. Hollywood simply isn't giving people what they want.
Wait, why am I on Furiosa now? Why can't I stay on one topic? Was the last one too boring? Okay, I guess it's worth talking about Furiosa's arc having more depth than Mad Max. I mean, Max was just kind of a drifter who wandered, while Furiosa had her entire history of tragedy and revenge revealed as a complete arc. It does expand on the more vocal themes that George Miller had developed with Fury Road when he was...
I'm sure you've all heard the big news from Star Wars recently. No, it wasn't the release of Andor, it was the introduction of... I'm sure you've noticed that nobody really breaks down any theories or plots from any Disney Star Wars shows.
Please don't go back to the Nerdrotic clips. Look, just let's stay on one topic. Okay, so Andor is one of the best Star Wars shows for how it focuses on fascism and the struggles that come with fighting back against it. Now, while it does play off the events of Rogue One, it also adheres to similar inspiration that George Lucas injected to his Star Wars trilogy, which, wait, why is everything getting fuzzy?
It's because Watchmen is just the latest property, run by a bad reboot alum who believes in assassinating legacy characters to build up new ones. The latest victims, Rorschach.
Okay, hang on. If you read the New Frontiersman excerpts between the chapters in Watchmen, it's made very clear that the publication supports the Ku Klux Klan, and this was the paper that Rorschach read most, so it's not a stretch that the ideas from Rorschach that he, left with the New Frontiersman would inspire a white supremacist movement. Now, the evolution of those influences makes sense if you go back to Alan Moore's original intent with Watchmen, which, he didn't want to create original characters. He wanted to use existing ones to craft a more scathing critique of superheroes that could, no, please stay with me, do not come...
It's boring. It's woke. It's cringe. It's simplistic. It's woke.
Why does this keep happening? Why does it keep cutting to Nerdrotic? What is happening with this video? What am I supposed to do? Is that it? Is that real? I mean, what do you want me to say? I have shown you the clips, you've heard his words. Nerdrotic is a racist, sexist, bad faith grifter who gets a lot wrong about movies and television. He used to own a comic shop, he used to sell drugs, and now he sells vitriol online. I mean, what more is there to say? This is why I've spent more of this video addressing Nerdrotic's arguments instead of Nerdrotic himself. Nerdrotic sucks, but my disdain for him is one built from the egregious ignorance that he has for film and television. And there's only so much of that verbal bile that I could put up with. Because I'm sure some Nerdrotic defenders will come in and say that I only looked at a few videos and cherry-picked some bad examples, and to those folks, I say, what's the limit for you? How many of these shitty Nerdrotic videos have to be addressed before you realize that this guy is full of shit and shouldn't be taken seriously? Because my limit was 1, and after going through more of his videos for this video that I'm making, I felt validated in that assessment. Remember how I mentioned the film Daisies at the beginning of this video? I didn't just bring up this film because I wanted to highlight a non-mainstream film, or just to demonstrate that I'm a cinephile who has watched a few films from the Czech New Wave. Daisies is a film that frames itself as, yes, I am going to talk about this, you need some culture in this video. Daisies is a satire of decadence and female stereotypes. The two central characters of Marie and Marie are posed almost like self-aware dolls of the role that society has assigned to them. They start the film by acknowledging that the world is spoiled, and thus they should spoil themselves. This begins a string of events involving eating too much food, blowing off dates, drunken dancing, bathing in milk, cutting up their bodies like they were paper dolls, and attempting suicide. After all the chaos that mostly involves, well, eating, the Maries soon conclude that they don't want to be spoiled. They attempt to clean up a dining room that they trash, they adopt manners, and tell themselves that they are now happy. Just in time for the chandelier to fall and kill them. The film can be read in a few ways, but one vocal aspect is a frustration with how women see themselves and their place in the world. The Maries feel like lifeless dolls devoid of humanity and decide to shrink any pretense of morals and manners. They gorge themselves and become a disruptive force. And for their pleasure-filled gluttony, they're punished. And for their reform to be happy with a life of manners, they are also punished. They can't win, and I share a similar frustration when addressing Nerdrotic. That's why so much of this video was made in defiance of what Nerdrotic wants his captive audience to think about. I would rather someone think more critically of films like Joker than simply watch Nerdrotic get made fun of. I also know that not profiling the person who made these claims is not as entertaining, but more importantly, it's being too cautious about calling out where these anti-woke talking points are spewing from. That is why I framed my video this way, to address what Nerdrotic has said while not letting him dominate too much of the worthwhile discussions. I also wanted to be entertaining while mocking the entertainment apparatus's algorithmic attention grabbing that made Nerdrotic so noteworthy. But maybe I haven't seen enough of Nerdrotic. I mean, I've hardly covered his podcast of Friday Night Tights, and he must be doing something right if he's amassing a big audience with a round table of other personalities. I mean, just look at how many personalities is assembled here. Wait, why is Gavin McGinnis there?
Uh-oh, I waited too long to piss. It's already started.
Oh,
my God,
Jesus
I'm
Christ.
sorry about this. Oh, my God. Sorry, guys. Whoa.
And there it is.
Oh, no.
Wait, that was a fake one, right?
Yeah, it was fake.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
fake.
okay, that was fake.
Yeah, no, I think I'm done. I don't think I need to take Nerdrotic seriously ever again. I'm not gonna listen to a guy who streams with people who whip out their penises and pee on camera, and then everybody denies that it happened in real time. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done with Nerdrotic forever. I'm out. Hey folks, thanks for watching my video on Nerdrotic. If you liked it, be sure to like and subscribe for more video essays and movie reviews that I do on this channel. I also have a Patreon in the description where you can help support some of the books that I've been writing. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Go watch Daisies. It's a great film. That's what this entire video has been about. Sorry if you thought it was about Nerdrotic. This is what it was all about. Good night.